Let's face it, we do a lot of suffering in this life. But what if I were to tell you that there are many kinds of suffering, some of which are extremely avoidable? Let's find out why. Hi, I'm Molly Knight Forde, founder of the Awareness School. And today I want to talk about the 4 kinds of suffering. Now, this is a vast subject. I could in no way cover all of the aspects of all 4 of these kinds of suffering. But I want to give you an idea of what these 4 kinds of suffering are so that you can question more about your life and go and find out more. There's so much written about suffering and how we can avoid a lot of the suffering that we experience. I first want to begin with what is called accidental suffering. And it simply comes from the fact that we are here on this planet and we must eat to live. We destroy things in order to live. We eat live things. We do not eat dead things. And so, again, as I've mentioned in other videos, there's more to this whole system than us simply feeding off the planet. But because we eat live things, we must pay a certain price. It's not free, though most of us probably think that it is and that we are the top of the food chain, as I talked in my video about reciprocal maintenance. Now, each of us must live and nourish one another. This is a conformable law. And I saw this clearly some time ago in a dream in which a being came to me and appeared before me. And at that time, I was grilling sausages. And you get that image of those links, those sausage links. And I was roasting them over like a pot-bellied stove. But there, right beneath it, was a manhole. And suddenly, the sausages slipped off my grilling fork and into the hole, down into the manhole. And so I quickly pulled back the manhole, only to see this reptilian feeding frenzy, which was very frightening. In the dream, it was so real. And I almost reached down to grab the sausage, and one of the reptiles emerged ready to attack me, and I quickly covered the manhole and sat gasping for breath, really in a lot of fear. But seeing that feeding frenzy was so disturbing. And the being beside me said, now you know what you look like to us. And I've never forgotten that dream. And it made me think about suffering and how we feed and compete. And there were so many elements to the dream, but I knew there was more. And simply by this law, there is natural suffering on this planet. So moving on to a second kind of suffering, which is voluntary suffering. This is the kind of suffering in which we make a sacrifice in order to gain something. For example, when we go to school, we expend energy and time and oftentimes money in order to get an education or a degree. We work in a job in order to get money. And we can work in all kinds of ways where we agree, in a way, in our own personal contract, that we understand we must exert some kind of energy in order to get something back. So we're totally willing to sacrifice or suffer in this way. Now, the third kind of suffering is the kind of suffering that you and I know best. It's how we live out our lives in misery, in wishing things were different, in depression, anxiety, or self-loathing, in all of those myriad ways that we are not at peace in our lives. And it comes in the form of negative emotion. And oftentimes we will simply stuff that emotion down until it comes bursting out from the shadows within ourselves and within the collective. But this kind of suffering is called avoidable suffering, because our work, our inner work, is able to alleviate a lot of that suffering. When we wake up from the dream, when we understand that we experience life subjectively instead of seeing things as they really are. And with our work, with presence and awareness, expanded awareness in which we are aware that we are aware, we can become cognizant of objectivity, in which we're able to observe ourselves and have empathy with others. And so this decreases that kind of suffering a great deal. Now, the fourth kind of suffering is called intentional suffering. And that may sound a lot like voluntary suffering, but with intentional suffering, there's no ego involved. It is not for our gain, but comes from a higher purpose, one which goes against the stream of life, one in which we struggle to understand the yes and the no within ourselves. It has to do with our physical life and the desires there, and the opposing non-desires of a greater psychic and spiritual life. And we encounter that kind of struggle all the time. But if we consciously and intentionally make an effort to be there, present with this inner struggle, something much, much greater is produced, and something that feeds not only us and each other, but the planet. The epitome of intentional suffering can be seen through Jesus, Buddha, and other prophets who have come to this planet to show us the way of intentional suffering. It has a much deeper meaning and feeds our inner process in a way that, of course, the struggles with the other sufferings do not. You'll hear Gurdjieff speak a lot about conscious labor and intentional suffering. And in my subsequent videos, you're going to find out how to do that. Have a great week.